Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nicole Rogers, the founder of WellSTEM Foundation. We're a newly established 501c3 that is opening our first behavioral health home for kids of color in summer of 2021. And so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, is the health of our community. WellSTEM is Afrikaans for well-being. And so we want to focus on all things well-being for the African American community. So I'm really excited for you to be with us. We have an amazing, amazing lineup for you of African Americans. We're going to be celebrating Black excellence tonight. It's Black History Month. And so we're going to be having a real conversation. I want to first let our audience know that our job tonight is not to be pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. We are here just to give you the facts so that you can make a good decision for you and your family about whether to get the COVID-19 vaccine. I also want to say that the panelists that here are distinguished members of our community. These are our personal feelings and opinions. They're not tied to any professional affiliations that we may hold. So I just want to preface this conversation with that. And I want to move on to introduce my co-moderator tonight from Duke City Talk, community activist, proud father of two, and one of my friends, Arthur Bell. Help me welcome Arthur Bell.
Good evening, everyone.
How are you doing tonight, Arthur?
Extremely blessed and honored to be on this with you all. Our panelists are extreme in all their fields, and I'm excited to see what they have to say.
Well, thank you for being here with me tonight. And tonight our format is pretty simple. We're going to start off with the facts. We're going to go straight to our experts so that they can give you some answers to questions that were pre-sent in by our community. So I want to thank you, those of you that got questions. We got probably over 50 questions that were sent in. We paired those together and came up with the ones, I tallied them up by how many times they came up, and we chose the top 10 questions that came up from our community. So thank you to those that went in and were able to answer those questions for us. So the first question that we have is going to go to our amazing panelists. The first one that we're going to go to is Dr. Tracy Collins. Thank you, Dr. Tracy Collins, for being with us. Dr. Collins is the Secretary of the New Mexico Department of Health. Yes, a Black woman is the president of the New Mexico Department of Health. So I want to welcome you, Dr. Tracy Collins, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation to be with you tonight. I really appreciate that. It's been a few months since I left UNM Post, and I'm really glad for the chance to reconnect with this community. I'm also eager for tonight's conversation. We know our history, and given that history, we know that some members of our community may have questions about the pandemic, the vaccine, and more. My hope is that we can have an open, honest, respectful, scientifically informed dialogue about those questions. I think all the participants share those goals, and I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about my own role or the work of the Department of Health. And again, thank you for the chance to be with you tonight.
Thank you so much. We're honored to have you. And so the first question, Dr. Collins, is what do you want the African American community in New Mexico to know about the vaccine?
I want people to know that the current vaccines that have been approved by an emergency use order have really the potential to help save lives. If you get the vaccine, you reduce your chance more than 90% of actually being infected and showing symptoms of this virus. We don't know just yet if it reduces your transmissibility, but it does protect you. And I've personally had both shots of Pfizer. I'm doing fine. My parents in Louisiana have each had their first doses. I have siblings in California, Joplin, Missouri, and Atlanta, Georgia, who've each had their first doses. This vaccine is so important because I don't want to see more members of our community become infected and suffer complications. And it's not even just about dying. That's horrible, and that's like the end result. But you can actually have long-term complications from COVID. So we want to protect ourselves.
Thank you so much for that. One little follow-up to that is I think as I'm talking to community members in the African American community, I feel like sometimes we feel like we're insulated because here in New Mexico, the numbers show that folks that are dying of COVID are our Native American brothers and sisters here in New Mexico. But that's not true on the national stage, right? So I'm glad that you mentioned the other states. Can you talk a little bit about that we're not, on the national stage, the numbers aren't matching New Mexico?
There is clearly a disparity. When you look at the proportion of African Americans who make up the population versus the numbers who are contracting COVID and the numbers who are dying, we are disproportionately affected by COVID. So there is a great risk to contracting this virus and dying from it. And I personally lost a first cousin back in March. He went in the hospital on Friday, he was dead on Wednesday. And so there is a lot at stake here. So it's important that we protect ourselves.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Now I'll turn it over to Arthur for the next question.
Next, we'll have Dr. Jamal Martin. And do you want to introduce yourself?
No, go ahead.
All right, your question will be, what is the vaccine supposed to do and when?
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate Dr. Collins' thoughtful remarks in relation to this particular question. So the question I have is, what is the vaccine supposed to do and when? And very simply, the purpose of the vaccine is to reduce sickness and death that's associated with the SARS 2.0, with the virus itself. And if one trusts the science, then I can say that, and I know this from my own experience working with vaccine preventable diseases and other things, that vaccines are probably the most effective public health tool for preventing illness and death. In fact, if I say something pro about vaccines for a moment, and I will do the cons in a moment, but vaccines are one of the 10 great public health achievements of the 20th century. And I say that because vaccines, along with the other 9 interventions, have given Americans 25 years more years of life. So that's an important thing to think about in terms of public health issues, in terms of increases of the lifespan. But there are several myths and misinformation that could cause vaccine coverage to fail and cause an increase in risk for outbreaks of vaccine preventable diseases. But I think the important thing to remember is that vaccines seek to aid in the immune response and immune memory. And I will address some of that a little bit more in the second question that I have during this series. But I will say this, that if one should opt to take the vaccine, you have to consider how vaccines protect communities and empower families, and that vaccines are more effective and community immunity is strengthened with relief from pre-existing conditions and improvements within racialized systems of treatment and prevention. And that's something we haven't really talked about in many ways, is the fact that we have a healthcare system that's based on a great deal of institutionalized and systemic racism. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many pre-existing conditions. And when people are exposed to this particular virus, it affects them the way that they do. And the issue that's really critical here is that when you look at, SARS 2.0 compared to SARS 1.0, which happened some time ago, SARS 2.0, it only takes is one person, and that one person can infect 2.5 other people, 2 to 2.5 other people, which, unlike the first SARS pandemic, one person could affect anywhere from 2 to 4 people. Unlike MERS, which is far deadlier, one person can affect anywhere from 2.5 to 7 more people. So we've got a dilemma on our hands here as we deal with this notion and how we flatten the curve. And as we talk about flatten the curve, I really think that we have to put an emphasis on the pre-existing conditions, and why the hospitalizations are that they are, and when people are exposed to this vaccine, what happens to their immune system and what happens with something that's called the cytokine burst. So there are lots of other issues here, but I think that in general, that as we talk about the effectiveness and community immunity, it is strengthened when we take the opportunities to reduce pre-existing conditions and work on improvements within the racialized system of treatment and prevention. And that means that we have to have a system that respects our human rights and our human dignity. And when our human rights and our human dignity is fulfilled, then marginalized communities of color can expect improvements in health-related quality of life and throughout the life course. And I would add that as we talk about this notion, as we talk about vaccine hesitancy and other types of issues, that this is a good opportunity to move just beyond saying that people have a hesitancy and a fear of the medical system and mistrust of the medical system, but move to the development of transformative dialogues and action for truth, justice, and reconciliation between leaders in the medical, public health system services, and people of color. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Oh. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
But I know I'm limited to 2 to 3 minutes, so.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. And you're right. I heard a lot about herd immunity. And so I want to come back to that in just a little bit after we get through our questions from the community. So next, we're going to go to Dr. Aisha Jones. And Dr. Aisha Jones, please take a couple minutes to introduce yourself, and we can go to the question after that.
Thank you, Nicole. My name is Dr. Aisha Jones. I am a family nurse practitioner, and I'm born and raised here in New Mexico, so this is my home state.
Wonderful. I'm so excited to have you. Dr. Aisha Jones and I have known each other since middle school, and I'm just excited to be able to do this work with her in the community. So Dr. Jones, your question from the community is, what are the known side effects to the vaccine?
So some of the known side effects to the vaccine are fevers, chills, body aches, headaches, flu-like symptoms. Some people experience them at their initial vaccination, and we kind of associated they might have had some exposure to the COVID or had COVID, and or some people had the symptoms at their second vaccination. I personally have received both of my vaccinations. I did get the Pfizer vaccination. I did not experience any symptoms at my first dose. My second dose, I did have body aches for about 24 hours and then they resolved suddenly. So I didn't have any other symptoms after that. I also wanted to tag in my colleague and friend Hussein to speak on some of his symptoms that he had either experienced or seen also in other colleagues.
Hi, thank you, Aisha. My name is Hussein bin Bilal. I am a physician assistant. I am not originally from New Mexico, I'm from Louisiana, but I've been here for 20 years, so I'm pretty well acclimated. I am one of the assistant directors of communication and simulation for hospital medicine, and I'm also the subcommittee chair for the health subcommittee on the governor's racial justice advisory committee. So having a lot of experience with this as well, I would divide the sort of the side effects into two categories, sort of local versus systemic, meaning side effects that happen at the site of injection, which are the more common type. So swelling, typically pain, some redness perhaps, and these are very mild typically. And then systemic, meaning sort of side effects that can affect the entire body, sort of joint muscle pain, like she was saying, chills, some night sweats. I know some people get nauseous, some people vomit, ranging all the way to anaphylaxis. And I know that's the big one that a lot of people talk about, and that's the one that I see on the news a lot. Anaphylaxis, meaning an overwhelming allergic reaction. So this is extremely rare. I think on the CDC, they said 11 cases per million doses. So, when I talk with a lot of the infectious disease doctors at the hospital, they'll remind people that probably the riskiest thing you're doing getting the vaccine is getting in your car and driving to get it, right? Because your chances of having an accident or something along those lines are markedly higher. And we're driving every day, right? Currently, given the contemporary circumstances in regards to how many people, Black, Indigenous, and people of color that are dying of COVID, this is something that would be, if we're talking about comparative risk, that this would be something that would be in favor of doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to have you with us tonight too. All right, now next question is actually for you, Hussein. And and I don't want to put you on the spot, so we actually do have a slide about this one because we were debating this, is how many Black people participated in both trials? And that one came up a lot in the questions from the community.
Oof. That is a great question. I am uncertain the exact numbers, to be quite honest. I wasn't terribly certain that I was going to get that question. So I'm very excited to see the slide just as much as the people watching are.
Yes. So I was on a webinar, a national webinar, where I got to see Dr. Corbett actually talk. She's an African-American woman that actually worked in the development of the vaccine. And she shared this slide, and I hope everybody can see that, where it talks about the actual breakdown of the trials. And so maybe one of our experts can explain this better than I, but this is the actual information from directly from the research institute that helped develop this vaccine. Anybody want to take a stab? Hussein?
Yeah, looking at the slide where it breaks it down by race, it looks like we are about 10% of the participants in the trial, and I guess cumulatively in the trials. Was this for a specific vaccine, or was it for?
This is for the Moderna vaccine.
Okay, fair enough.
And the numbers are comparable for Pfizer as well.
Okay.
These numbers are comparable for both vaccines that are now with the EUA.
And so I'm going to stop the screen just so we can kind of discuss that with our experts, because it came up, I think, over I want to say 15 times or so where people asked that question, how many people, African Americans, were in the trials? Dr. Collins, why do you think that matters to our community?
Well, I think it matters for external validity or the generalizability of the findings. Does the results of this trial, do they apply to me? So if you look at who's included, percentage of women, percentage of minorities, communities of color, African Americans specifically, and then also looking at risk factor profiles. So it's a very important question and it needs to be asked. I think it's okay. It's not the best. If you think the representation of African Americans throughout the US overall and the representation in the trials, it's a little lower, but it's still a good number. And so I think it's a good representation. So I think for me, from a scientific perspective, I feel comfortable that they have good generalizability or external validity in the trials.
Thank you. And I'll pass it over to Arthur for our next question.
So our next question is, how is the mass vaccination different from the Tuskegee experiment? And that's for Dr. Zir.
Hi, everyone. I'm Asada Zarai, and just really pleased to be here today, and lovely to see Secretary Collins here. We're just so proud of her. And Nicole, thank you so much for organizing this conversation. And I just love that it's about putting the information out there so that people can make an informed decision, especially during this time when science has been attacked by COVID deniers in particular. And so just thank you so much for organizing this, and I'm happy to be a part of it. I'll let you know that to support this effort and others, the Division for Equity and Inclusion at UNM has set up a COVID website. So if you just Google climate and COVID, DEI, UNM, you can get to that site. And the conversation that Dr. Fauci had at Howard University a couple of months ago is linked there, and we're going to continue to upload resources for the community. Again, following Nicole's lead so folks can make their own informed decisions. And so getting to the answer to the question about the Tuskegee experiment, the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in African-American men was not a mass vaccination campaign. So the question was, are they the same or how are they different? It instead was an unethical research study conducted between 1932 and 1972 by the US Public Health Service and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. According to the CDC, the study involved 600 Black men, 399 of whom had syphilis. These African-American men were not told that they had syphilis, and further, they did not know that their condition remained untreated during the study. Our institutional review boards today that govern the ethical conduct of research now require informed consent. So academia actually learned from the mistakes made. But this important lesson was at the cost of these men's lives. This extremely unethical and racist behavior on the part of the CDC in the Tuskegee study and other harms committed against Black bodies and souls in the name of science have contributed to African Americans' historical mistrust against the healthcare establishment. The unfortunate reality is that those harms continue until today. And that's why Black people talk about the Tuskegee study in the same breath in which they speak of the medical establishment's earned mistrust. As more African Americans gain access to careers in healthcare and achieve credentials to conduct research in health equity and related areas, we have begun to quantify the depth of the disparate treatment in health and its results in both in terms of morbidity and mortality. And we have also been able to provide more oversight, yielding better results for patients of Black doctors and leading to improvements in medical and pharmaceutical research. For example, Kizzy Corbett, as Nicole mentioned just a moment ago, an African-American woman, has been praised by Dr. Anthony Fauci as a key scientist behind the COVID-19 vaccine that has from 94 to 100% efficacy against clinical disease. And so she is bringing her excellence to that work, and we're all benefiting as a society. Also, some of the researchers conducting COVID-19 vaccine trials were intentional about enrolling more African Americans and even partnering with historically Black colleges and universities to diversify participants in drug trials to test the effectiveness of the COVID vaccines. So we do have a long way to go, but the more we diversify health sciences in the field of medicine, the more inclusive they become.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful answer, because I learned something in that answer. I didn't know that it wasn't a mass vaccination campaign. I see the pictures of all the African-American men lined up and the white nurse there to give them their shot. And I automatically thought that that was a mass vaccination campaign similar to this. So thank you for teaching us something, because that does ease a little bit of my anxiety that this is different from that. And we still have a long way to go as far as the disparities, right? A long way, but that does help. So thank you so much. All right. Next, we're gonna go to Dr. Tracy Collins. And Dr. Tracy, the question from the community is the vaccine safe, even though it was just created?
Yeah, so it is, under the Operation Warp Speed. So there's like, well, is it safe? So based on the data we have, there are really only a few sort of really severe reactions, anaphylactic reactions, where people need like an EpiPen to help them not respond adversely to the vaccine. But other than that, the only adverse reactions really go back to like local reactions, arm soreness, the fever, and other sort of symptoms that shows that your body is reacting and revving up the immune system to get you prepared to prevent you from getting the COVID infection. So overall, it is safe, but the two that we know so far, Moderna and Pfizer.
Thank you so much. Arthur, I'll turn it over to Arthur.
All right, the next question would be, what things can we do if we are feeling anxiety from taking the vaccine? Dr. Stephanie McIver.
Thank you. First, I'll introduce myself. I'm Stephanie McIver. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I direct the counseling service at UNM. I also direct the New Mexico Black Mental Health Coalition, and I was raised here in New Mexico, was gone for many years and came back, and I'm really, really glad to be here and have been working in the community on mental health issues that affect us as a community. And one area of expertise that I provide is treating anxiety disorders. So Nicole, I heard you say earlier, you used the word anxiety, and I thought, well, that's a very apt description for what we experience when we're facing this choice about the vaccine. I had a cousin just contact me just before this program started from South Carolina, who's been kind of paralyzed with anxiety about whether or not to get the vaccine. And the thing about our psychology as human beings is that whenever we're faced with an unknown, it is normal for our nervous system to escalate in a condition that we refer to as anxiety. It's normal. And that's true anywhere. Anytime we go into any kind of medical procedure, but we don't have all the information that we need to help us know what to expect, we will experience anxiety. Anytime we go into any experience where we don't have all the information that satisfies our curiosity or our comfort level, we will experience anxiety. And anxiety results in us taking a few different stances, right? One is to defend against that thing. think about the whole fight or flight experience, but we'll defend against it. And so we've heard many people in the rollout to the vaccine become rather defensive and protest against it, which I viewed as an anxiety response. It's an unknown. And when people don't have enough information about it, that is sort of a natural human response. Another response is to avoid it, to avoid anything that we don't understand. And so there are lots of people who are kind of keeping their head down through this experience and waiting for the pandemic to be over and hoping they don't have to make a decision about it. And then the other is that we kind of freeze. You know, we get stuck in indecision and don't know how to resolve that. Those are all natural reactions to anxiety and reactions that I see in people. But one way to resolve that is to get information, exactly what we're doing here tonight. And so I thank you, Nicole and Arthur and all my colleagues for being here to provide information, because it's knowledge and having our curiosities or our concerns satisfied by getting that information from trusted experts to help us resolve our anxiety. And then we feel more comfortable about it. I myself met with anxiety when it rolled out, in part because we, as a whole community, are dealing with, as was mentioned before, a lot of distrust, you know, from the messengers that were rolling out this to us, the previous administration that had acted in a way that we didn't think met our best interests, our whole medical experience, all of our community that have had really unfortunate and frequently negative interactions with the medical community, the healthcare community. It's natural that we'd have anxiety, but so to resolve it, you find trusted messengers, you seek information that is reviewed and tested and valid, and you ask people for their own experience. I had the vaccine in December, my first dose in December, and my second dose in January, and all the effects that people have mentioned already, I experienced. They were very mild and to be expected, and nothing that was intolerable or unmanageable. But I made a decision to get the vaccine after asking people that I trusted and seeking out information that I found solid and valid. And that's how I resolve my own anxiety. So anxiety is natural. It results in those different stances, but it's resolvable.
Thank you for saying that, because as you said that, I took a big, deep breath myself, because in talking to people to prepare for this, people were really anxious, and they were, one woman mentioned that it feels like if she mentioned it to her doctor, when she did mention it to her doctor, her fears are often dismissed.
Yeah.
Right. And I want everybody in our community listening to know that it's okay that you have these anxieties and that you have this fear.
Absolutely.
It's historically warranted. We know
it is warranted.
Yeah. And it's okay to have that feeling.
Right. And our fears and our concerns have really meaningful information in them. So I want everybody that has concerns or curiosities to kind of write them down. They're all valid and they deserve to be resolved. The key is finding trusted and available people to help you resolve them. And so sometimes it's not the people that we wished it would be. You know, sometimes it's not the provider that we're going to see on that day, but there are others that we can reach out to say, hey, I have this concern, I have these questions, I have this curiosity. Do you have an answer? Because we do deserve answers, and it's those answers that help us resolve our anxiety.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to go to our next expert. And I had the pleasure of meeting Miss Vajra Dorn a couple of years ago when we did Black History, and she taught about Big Mama's remedies. So Vajra, we would love for you to introduce yourself, and then we'll go to your question.
All right. My name is Vajra Dorn. I'm a registered nurse. I've been a registered nurse here in Albuquerque for more years than I want to mention. And I've worked in multiple different systems. Currently, I'm working with in an adult residential homes for DD waiver clients who are also at very high risk of mortality for this disease. And I just want to thank Nicole for including me. I think this is a forum that is necessary, and it's going to answer a lot of questions for a lot of people.
Well, the question that we have for you is actually perfect because it asked about what other holistic ways can we protect ourselves from this virus?
Well, this virus, unlike with any other, the best offense is a good defense. We've got to get back to being healthy. The people that are dying are the elderly, the people who are in poor economic areas and cannot eat healthy foods. And so the things that we have to focus on is healthy eating, making sure we're getting enough rest, exercise, drinking lots of water, staying hydrated, and managing stress. And all of these things can be done. They're difficult to do, especially when you're in a pandemic and you're told to stay in the house and don't move. So what we've got to do is find ways to keep ourselves moving and keep ourselves motivated. I've talked to more people who have said they have gained COVID weight. And that's one of the things that we have to work on. If getting up, walking around the room a few times a day, taking deep breaths, those are all of us who have these sedentary jobs can sit every hourly and do deep breathing. We really need to focus on those things. And to ensure that our immune systems stand on a strong foundation, we need diets rich in vitamin B, B6, C, D3, and zinc. Our bodies use vitamin B6 to make antibodies, vitamin C to keep bacteria and viruses out. Zinc tends to interfere with the replicating of viruses. We can't stop these diseases, but once they get in our bodies, if our bodies are strong, they're able to fight them. As we see with younger people, healthier people, they're dying less, but they still get ill. I know a lot of young people who've got severely ill. So there was a study in 1918 during a pandemic when they treated people outside in the sun, and those people had fewer deaths, and the healthcare workers got sick less because they were exposed to sun. In New Mexico, I think if any of you go get your lab work done, your doctor is going to tell you you're deficient and you need to take vitamin D. So there is an online everywhere you can find, there's one that's called Medicinal Benefits of Whole Foods. And it really tells you all the foods that you need to take and what they're good for. And I've got lists of them that talks about the foods high in vitamin B, like avocados and salmon and leafy greens. And there's just, the list goes on and on. I don't have enough time to go through them all. I wish I did. I look at the leafy greens and that hits the greens hit in several different places for zinc, for vitamin C, for B. And I remember my grandmother used to, every time we got a cold, gave us pot liquor. The reason being is when you boil those greens, all of those nutrients get into that good juice. And every time you got sick or a headache or anything, they would go get a little of that pot liquor and they'd have you drink it because that's where all of the nutrients were. So I think it's just really important that as we focus on whether we're getting this vaccine or not, keeping our communities healthy and keeping them strong is one way of fighting it. One of the things that COVID does, that we know that it attacks the lungs. One of its target organs is our lungs. And we're in New Mexico. So chili and wasabi and ginger and mustard and onions, all of those things help break up mucus and help us get rid of mucus out of our lungs. And that's really important. That yes, we have to rest, but if you get COVID, you don't want to lie down, because if it gets into your lungs and you don't move, the fluid fills up and it gets worse. So there's a lot of things that we need to just work towards on just general well-being and general health. There's no need to go out and overdose on any of these vitamins. We just need to make sure that we're getting an adequate supply of these vitamins in our systems. And you can't get it in fast food, unfortunately, for the most part. So healthy eating, going back to the basics, just making some good old-fashioned basic good meals is the beginning of helping us to get to a point with our bodies that we can fight this dreaded disease.
Thank you so much. That is great. I think back to your talk, and you talked about those things like witch hazel and all these other things that we used to use that I remember my grandma used to use roots and things when we got coughs. That
Right.
she would boil and they smelled horrible and they tasted horrible. But man, I didn't have a cough after I drank it anymore.
That's right. That's right.
So,
And we used to think that you take decongestants to get rid of coughs, but we found that we were drying you up so much that we set up for bacterial infections. So we need things that are going to be an expectorant, things that are going to help us cough and help keep those fluids out of our lungs and help keep that mucus out of our lungs. So there's lots of things we can do to make it better. I wish there was a holistic way to keep this thing at bay, but there is not one. There's just one to help us fight it.
thank you so much. So everybody listen out there, go see your big mamas. They're gonna tell you what you need to know to Big Mama's
Amen.
remedies, and listen to what they're saying because they have the wisdom.
Amen.
All right. So next we're going to go over to Arthur, who's going to talk about our next question. 2 more questions here, and we're going to do some audience participation and then bring in our community members. Thanks for hanging in there with us. Arthur?
So our next question is for Dr. Jamal Martin. Do vaccinations come from Africa? And that's a misconception that's out there right now.
Okay. Well, I think let's take away the word vaccinations for a moment and think about the history of Onesimus, who was an enslaved African who lived in Massachusetts and informed his doctor of a cultural medical practice that was used by folks in West Africa. And that was a practice that they used that helped protect them against smallpox, where you would scrape part of the skin of an infected person and expose an unexposed person to that, and they would develop immunity from that. And from that legend grew about where to go with smallpox in America. Long and short, that's the story. So I wouldn't call it actually a vaccination as we call it today.
So we could maybe say that some of the science came from Africa about how to protect ourselves.
All science came from Africa. When you think about STEM, it all comes back to ancient Kush and Kemet. It all goes back to that. And everything was appropriated and stolen and misappropriated and co-opted. So
tell them, Dr. Martin. That's why we needed you on this panel, my sir.
Well, I'd like to answer Alfred Matheson's question in a little bit more detail also too.
Yes, we see. Thank you for those that are putting questions in the YouTube chats. We're going to get to those in just 1 minute. All right, next we're going to go over to Dr. Zarai, who's going to talk. We're going to switch it to solutions now, right? So I love that someone sent this question in because for me, I'm a solution-oriented person. We know what it is, why our people are dying at a higher rate than everybody else in this country. But so Dr. Zarai, what can be done in the Black community to build trust with the healthcare system?
Absolutely. I'm so happy this question was posed as well. And as a sociologist, my scholarly career has largely been focused on issues of health equity. And one of the things that I've learned is that a social justice lens is really apt when we want to think about the heavy, disproportionate toll of COVID-19 in Black communities in New Mexico, in the US, and worldwide. And restorative justice is relevant for placing into context the lack of access to and perspectives concerning the new vaccines. So it's crucial that we create equitable investments, not equal investments, equitable investments into our communities, so that we are looking at those concerns in terms of vaccine hesitancy. And as has been stated here tonight already, that those concerns would be validated both by healthcare professionals and our trusted messengers. And this also includes targeted marketing to our communities and a whole information campaign. And it really should be an accessible information campaign that is culturally relevant. And so give us the information that we actually are asking for and that we actually need. This also means providing as much vetted information as possible to our extended families, our friends, and our neighbors, so that they will have all the evidence that they need to make an informed opinion. Equitable and culturally relevant investments also include fueling our students, very close to my heart as a college professor, and our youth with the tools to have respectful and constructive conversations with their elders about the virus and the vaccine. So again, I'm just happy to be here. I'm glad we're talking about this, and conversations like this, I think, also contribute to the solution.
Thank you so much. I am going to ad lib here and go to Dr. Tracy Collins because I'm personally really interested in how you would answer this question, Dr. Collins, about how we can build trust in the African American community with healthcare.
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. I think there are several steps to building trust. You must reach out to the community and you must pull community members into the conversation and the decisions you're making. So it's not about putting things on people. It's about pulling people in to say, this is what we think should happen. What are your thoughts? And coming together to a common conclusion. So it's really being transparent, being forthright with the evidence, letting the community weigh in, and then coming to a shared agreement about how best to do what's best for the community in an effective way and strategic way. And I turn to Dr. Zarai, Dr. Martin, and others to say, what do you think? I mean, I'd love to hear their thoughts as well.
Dr. Martin?
I think you're muted, Dr. Martin. I see you talking.
Agree with my colleagues in terms of the sociological approach and some of the public health approaches to this. And I think that also too, that at some point, we probably need to invest more opportunities for development of health literacy in our communities so that they understand the sciences and medicine in a much deeper way. We've known that we've got a lot of things that are going on in terms of anti-intellectualism that's happening in the society right now. So we need people to be better informed about this and develop knowledge so that they can make better decisions as a community and as an individual. And I think I would go back to something that I said also too. I mean, we've known for a long time the issues that are responsible for the racialized issues that happen to us in this country. And I think at some point, quite frankly, I'm tired of people saying that, bringing that up, that we know that exists. So where are the solutions, as Nicole had mentioned before? And that's why I think at some point we need to encourage the medical public health systems and services, in a dialogue that deals with a transformative dialogue, as I said before, that works on action for truth, justice, and reconciliation. It worked in South Africa, and I think it can work here. And one of the things that Dr. Collins has asked me to work on for her is trying to turn help the I see Dr. Sarai laughing a little bit also too, is working on and helping to transform the College of Population Health into an anti-racist college. So we're working with the curriculum, we're working with the studies, we're working with the education piece, and we're going to turn to the infrastructure of the college itself. And we hope that it will be a model for the rest of the Health Sciences Center. And as of right now, because of students, white coats for Black and Indigenous lives, I'm being bombarded with questions from the students in medicine, pharmacy, nursing, and other issues saying, help us do that in our schools also too. And I'm also getting it from main campus in biology and speech pathology and other areas. So it's a daunting task, but it's one of the things that needs to be done in terms of how we get to the root causes of all this, which is basically, institutionalized with white supremacy at its best. So that's just part of it. It's multifactorial and requires multiple levels of analysis and requires different opportunities for engaging with people in the efforts to build trust, which is why as I think more and more about it, I like this idea of having, the truth and reconciliation issues that are taking place. And that will help bring about healing also too, because as we talk about this anxiety that exists and the issues that people, people of color and communities of color have to put up with on a day-to-day basis and how that affects their immune system, people can't take much more of this. They really can't take much more. We have a system that tells people they're sick because their biology is defective, and it's not about biological determinism. It's about the embodiment of all the stresses and microaggressions and the pressures of dealing with this notion of not being seen as a human being. And this is where ethnic studies like Africana studies plays a role in the sense also too, when you look at the works of some of the great sociologists and thinkers and people like W.B. Du Bois and others who talked about whiteness and these issues, over 100 years ago, and how that's been ignored. And there's been a regeneration of that thought in many ways too. So I'd say carpe diem, seize the time, and let's move forward, because we can't have unity unless we deal with truth and put truth on the forefront.
Amen to that. And I always share the story. The first time I heard Dr. Martin speak was at Juneteenth 3 years ago. And he said to the audience, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I was like, wait a minute. So I'm all about getting us to the table so we are not on the menu
Well,
anymore.
this is where Dr. Zarai's job is so important, as she as the VP for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. How do we use those skills and those opportunities to develop a better workforce? And not even so much a better workforce, but a better human being, that understands human dignity and human rights issues. And so this is a clarion call. This, SARS 2.0 is a wake-up call on so many different levels.
Yes. All right. Thank you, experts. We're going to go to some audience participation. Thank you, audience, for hanging in there with us. We're also going to get to a couple questions from Alfred Matheson and Jay Blackwell. Thank you so much for putting those in the chat. We'll get to those as soon as we do some audience participation. So here's what we're going to do. Everybody watching, we have about 50 people on YouTube, 35 or so on Facebook. So we know what we're looking for as far as audience participation. So what you're going to do is you're going to pull out your phones, and experts and panelists, you can do it too if you want. You pull out your cell phone. You don't have to download an app. I promise. No apps, no putting in your your email address so you can get more junk mail. What you're going to do is you're going to go to menti.com. So I'm going to put it on the screen. Menti.com, www.menti.com. It's going to ask you, and it's on the screen for you as well. It's going to ask you for a code. Okay, so menti.com. You're going to enter the code 8705489, and that is going to take you to our poll tonight. So we want to make sure we're reaching our audience. Our target audience is the African American community. So please answer for us. It's completely anonymous. We can't see any of your responses. We can't track them. There's no IP address tracking. So again, you're just going to open up your browser, type in www.menti.com. I'm doing it with us, and it's going to bring it up. Oh, look. And as people do it, it shows up on the screen for us and populates it for us. So again, the code to enter is 8705489 on menti.com. And this will take you directly to our poll so that you can answer your questions. So again, we have 50 people on YouTube, 35. So if you look at the bottom right, it tells me how many people are answering these questions. So there's more of you out there that could answer these questions. I see you. So again, you can check as multiple. I'm multiracial, right? So I have the ability to check multiracial and all of the different options there. So I'm gonna wait just a couple more seconds because I know we have more people out there. There's only 35 answers, but I can see we have more people watching. So this is your chance to participate. Join the conversation. We have 3 questions for you. It won't take long. Menti.com. You're going to enter 8705489, and then you're going to choose what you have there. So we're looking, oh, there it goes. I want to get to 50 people. I want to get to 50. 50 of you are going to answer this question for me. Oh, we're at 49. One more answer and we'll go on to the next question. Oh, we hit our 50. Woohoo. All right. We're going to go ahead and go on to the next. Oh, 51. See, as long as we exceed our goal, I'm happy. All right. So we're going to go on to the next question, which is, are you getting the COVID-19 vaccine? Let's talk about it. That's what we're here to do tonight. If you're undecided, that's okay. Put undecided. Yes, you're getting it. No, you're not. Or if you're undecided, let us know. Again, this is completely anonymous. I can't see who's entering what, but we need to get to 51 people on this answer here. 51 people on this here. Almost there. Look at this. Okay. I love seeing the numbers rolling in. Seeing the numbers rolling in is exciting. So we're at 45. We're waiting to get to 51. Oh, we got more. Look at this. Look at our community. We saw this. Look at this. 32 of you say, yes, you're going to absolutely get the vaccine. 8 are a hard no, and 15 are undecided. Hopefully tonight we'll get you some information that will help you make a decision for those of you that are undecided.
This
So
is
we'll-
shocking. Seeing these numbers is different than what I was actually expecting to go.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's go to the next. We're up to 60 people. So next we're going to go to the next question. And this is one for me to see if we did our jobs as experts, telling you some information that maybe you didn't know before. So the next question, did you learn something new listening to the experts tonight? To me, that's super important that you at least got something out of it. And we haven't even had the community discussion yet. That's coming up. Stay tuned, folks, because that's going to be powerful. So again, did you learn something from the experts that you didn't know before? So look, most of us that have, and we're going to wait till we get back up to that 60, and then we'll get into bringing in our community into the discussion, which I'm really excited about. Look at that. Yay, experts, look at that. You did an amazing job. And that was my goal for tonight, is that you at least leave here with some information that you didn't have before. All right. Yay, thank you so much for the audience participation. Keep putting your questions in the chat, because next we're going to go to our community discussion where we're going to include some of your questions as well as some of the questions of the folks that we have with us tonight. Thank you all for playing along on the Mentimeter there. All right. Arthur, you want to help me bring in our community members?
Sure can. Let's see who you want to start with. You want to start off with Torrance Green? You want to introduce yourself, sir?
Torrance Green, part of Black New Mexico Movement, one of the co-founders, leaders of Black Mexico Movement. Just been out here trying to make a change, make a difference, and help people bridge the gap between us out here in the streets doing stuff and the people who are making decisions.
Do you have any specific questions for the experts, Torrance?
Yeah, my main question is they've compared the COVID-19 and the vaccine, everything to the flu. What are the big differences? What is the vaccine? What's in it? If anybody can answer that question to help me. I do plan on getting the vaccine. I just don't know what's in it, and I am nervous about it.
Who wants to take a stab at that for our experts?
Well, the vaccine is synthetic. It's not something that's a live virus. So it's really using a particle or the messenger RNA from the virus to stimulate your immune system to react to it, to then be able to have defense against the virus. So it's very safe, unlike if you have like a live virus injected into you. This is not a live virus. So I'll add that part.
Thank you.
Yeah, and typically with the flu vaccine, while there are like the flu mist, the one that they give you up the nose is a live virus. How they typically do it is they'll take chunks of the dead virus and they'll give it to your body to teach your body how to fight against the flu when you get it, right? And so I'm trying to find. I majored in biochemistry and I remember very little of this stuff, but I'll tell you that the DNA doesn't leave our nucleus of our cell. So it stays inside the center of our cell. And how the message gets from inside of our cell to outside of our cell to make proteins is with mRNA. Okay. So mRNA is sort of the communication between the DNA and the outside of the cell. So what we're doing here is we're making an mRNA that that makes a piece of the virus, a piece of the virus that's important for the virus to function, and then we give our patients or give ourselves the mRNA so we can develop immunity. I don't know if that made sense.
Both parties are correct.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the difference being is that this mRNA vaccine uses a lipid or fat delivery vehicle. And so it's unlike viruses that carry a live virus or a weakened virus or a killed whole virus or a virus that replicates. And so it doesn't use any genetic material. And so therefore that part is relatively safe because it cannot replicate. However, sometimes vaccines such as this, well, actually, we haven't gotten to a subunit vaccine yet that uses both antigen proteins with the genetic material. And adjuvants can be very dangerous sometimes, which worries a lot of people take vaccines because of the mercury ingredients that's in it and other adjuvants. But sometimes those subunit vaccines require multiple doses for long-term immunity, plus, the adjuvant to create a strong immune response. So this gets back to something we were saying before in terms of protecting ourselves, in terms of our nutritional status, our dietary habits, and other types of things. But the onus is not just on the individual also, too. It is about the system. So this is entirely different in its conception, and the fact that when we think about the relative speed which this came about, mRNA vaccines have been worked on for over a decade or so or more. So the knowledge that has taken place to produce this in that quick time was sort of the miracle in itself, but not, because we've been working on this for 10 years. We, the scientists, been working on it for 10 years. So we knew what to do to mix and match and how to make it better. My only concern and complaint, just as a scientist, is that I'm concerned about, and I have to learn more about nanomedicine and nanoparticles, which are very natural in some ways, but they use that to speed up the delivery so that the antigenic properties can work better. But I'm also concerned that the fact that with an mRNA vaccine, that it may cause a negative impact on neutralizing antibodies. But all this is new and we're still learning. And for the most part, vaccines are fairly safe, which is, I want to get back to later. So thank you, folks.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. And we'll put some information in the chat, because of those of us that aren't medical professionals or don't look at research studies all the time, some of that made me go, what is that? Like RNA, what does it stand for? What does RNA even?
Ribonucleic acid.
Stephanie McIver put it in the chat. So
ribonucleic acid. Okay, so we'll put that in the chat so you guys can do some research on that, because that's part of it, right? Is that how do we make sure people understand exactly what it is that we're talking about, which is important.
Nicole, can I add that it's not modifying your genetic code? It's really the vaccine's genetic code that's put into your body to get you to respond to that. And so there's nothing altering your genetic code. I just want to make sure people are clear about that. I'm so glad that you made that clarification, because that did come up when I was talking to some of my church folk friends. And I want to bring it up just that way, that, the end times mentality, and that they're changing my DNA and they're, putting a chip in me or something like that. I mean, I did hear that when we were prepping for this. Anybody else in the community hear that? Is it just me? Okay.
I've had patients ask me about that as well. And I think it's very important, once again, to let people know that it's a safe space. So if they have thoughts like that, it's important that they feel safe enough to talk about it. So there is no stupid question. There is no silly question. And given the historical atrocities that have taken place, if someone were to say that to me, there's no way I could say to them, oh, wow, that's something that's absolutely not possible, right? But it's good for them to talk to me about this, because it's not happening in this situation.
Now, is the current vaccine protecting against and I'm going off of hearsay and news, the current mutation, there's supposed to be a European version of the COVID. Does the current vaccine that's out, that's being given, does it cover all of that?
Did I see Dr. Jones' hands up to cover that?
So the way I would look at it is, like, the vaccination is creating like these little, it's like a ball of protein to identify the virus before attacking your body. So it's got these little, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of what the COVID virus is, but those little red little tentacles that are on there. What that does is it gives it, if the virus comes into your body, it says, ooh, I need to attack that before it attacks me. Now the variant is deep down inside of that nucleus, like round body. And so what the vaccination is trying to do is first attach that protein to say, okay, let me make sure we get rid of this before the variant or the virus itself breaks out of a little bubble and comes into your body, if that makes sense. More simple, but I'm sorry, I know it's hard.
No, that breaks it down exactly how I can understand it. Terrence, how about you?
Because when you look at it that way, as she just explained, it focuses on teaching T cells to recognize, you know, the invader, and then either killer cells are produced to release toxins to kill the infected cells, or it has an impact on antibodies, B cells that produce antibodies which neutralize the virus. So it works in two different ways. So the vaccines, you know, are the SARS 2.0 vaccines are like other viral vaccines in that they all work on immune response and memory.
Got it. Okay. All right. I think next we're going to go to Erica Davis Crump, who is one of my, I just love spending time with her on the New Mexico Black Central Organizing Committee, which for those of you that didn't hear, the Crown Act, which we've been working on, passed the House today unanimously. It's anti-discrimination bill. Woohoo! No, this is our
not
space.
muted anymore.
That's okay. That's okay. That's what I wanted, is us to be excited about that. And I'm just so glad and grateful to have you here. So tell us a little bit about yourself as a quick introduction, and then feel free to ask a question if you have one for the experts.
Yes, hi. This is such a beautiful and wonderful space. And Nicole Rogers, ma'am, there's nothing quite like you, love. Thank you for always thinking of community and us and putting us first, and having this difficult conversation, uncomfortable conversation, and pulling in the best minds to do so. My name is Erica Davis Crump. I am born and raised here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, can claim nowhere else, wouldn't want to. And I'm really happy to be in space with everybody. My mother figure is on this call, Miss Vajra Dorn. And before I get into anything else, I have to say thank you, because in this pandemic, as it's been so much, all of us have this, we're seeing the multifaceted just grief and pain and anxiety and actual sickness. And sometimes it's hard to push through work and it's hard to push through things. And I'm so grateful that I have family that holds me down. So thank you, Mom. I appreciate you. And I have a question, because I'm also an activist. I work with the New Mexico Black Central Organizing Committee that was established in 2020, born out of COVID, to make Black life better. But one of the things that that I am concerned about, that I see on the Twitters, one thing about the Twitterverse and Black Twitter that I love is sometimes the extremes are much, and information travels at the viral rate as well. So with my concern is there are new articles coming out that are expressing new symptoms, and I personally think projecting some new fears. So what are the experts' thoughts and input on navigating and on helping people manage their expectations around symptoms? Because as a person with pre-existing conditions, I have asthma and allergies, and there are some things that, like, I have some of the symptoms that I've for the last 4 years because I have chronic asthma. And I use a steroid inhaler, right? So my taste stays gone and I just live on cupcakes sometimes. Mom, I'm working on it. I heard you. I'm working on it. So one of the things that I have questions on is, how can you keep just keep some real normalized expectations with new symptoms unfolding, and you're already checking for the ones that seem really general. Like if you're in this grocery store and you sneeze in your mask, you just have to leave because everybody's looking at you crazy. So that's my question for the experts. How do you manage the expectation, or when is a good time to go and say, these are my symptoms, oh my gosh, red flag, let's go, let's get checked out?
Dr. Jones?
I would say, when in doubt, always check it out high. I would say, when in doubt, always get it checked out, because we are seeing variable symptoms, and sometimes we ignore things, and that's what's getting some of us in trouble, especially the community of color, because we were like, we don't want to go to the hospital, you don't want to seek healthcare, you don't want to pay a bill. But I say, when in doubt, it's better to check it out than to not get seen at all, because we are seeing such variety in some of these symptoms. So I would just say, we're not going to shame you as healthcare providers, and I hope nobody would, to just say, thank you for coming into our organization and being seen today. And it'd be good to say, you know what, everything's okay. Here's some things to take back with you to look for, and whenever you need us to come back and see us. But I always say, just don't hesitate, because that's what we do. With some of our other diagnoses, like it's Heart Month also, and people ignore the simple things of like heart attack symptoms. And so I say, when in doubt, just check it out, and we'll welcome you guys, coming into an organization and just say, let's look at it. If it is, then we work through it. If it isn't, then you'll be equipped with the tools to know, okay, it's not this, but this is what I need to look for.
Would
Can I
anyone
jump
else
in
like to
here?
respond?
Yeah,
Yes,
I
please.
would. I would. We rely upon data, right? Data is the key to us understanding and recovering from this whole thing. And we all represent that data. So as Aisha was saying, that if you have symptoms and you're concerned about it, going in and getting checked out also contributes to the data, right? That helps us understand what this is and what it isn't. An example came up. I serve in a health clinic. We're looking at COVID issues and cases and symptoms, positive and negative, that show up on our campus. And what we discovered when people get the vaccine, people had started to report some GI distress, gastrointestinal distress, like mild ooginess, intestinal ooginess, and sometimes diarrhea. And that hadn't been considered, for a while there. But as people started reporting that, it wasn't a common thing, not sure if it was related to the vaccine, it got added to the data set so that we understand more what it is and what it isn't. So we all help to create clarity around this. And so I really encourage people to, report your symptoms, add it to the data set so that we can figure it out. We're all helping to figure it out.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Dr. McIver. I mean, so one thing that always bothered me was when I was in school, they always said, well, Black people present atypically for stuff, right? Heart attacks or strokes or what have you. And it's just not the case. Black people present how Black people present. They just didn't seek enough of us out to in the studies to get a clear idea of how we present, right? And so a way we can change that is by seeking medical care when we have issues. So, I definitely I agree with what she's saying, and thank you for asking such a thoughtful question. Thank you.
That's a great question, and those are great responses and answers too. One of the things we have to do in medical education is train physicians and caregivers to ask what has happened to you as opposed to what's wrong with you, so that we get a better reading of those things. But I think that, just for a bit of a dialogue for a moment, the question that Dr. McIver brought up is that when we think about coronaviruses in particular, people sometimes get away from the actual science and start thinking in other ways in terms of clinics or administrations or whatever the case may be, clinical issues. But coronaviruses, as we see them now, particularly with SARS, affects not only the respiratory system, but also the GI mucosa also too in mammals. So there may be some residual stuff that was there that wasn't captured by, the vaccine itself and antibodies or whatever the case may be that affected the GI tract as well. So we're still learning. We're still collecting lots of data. And unfortunately, this whole situation was mismanaged by, the government and leaders who destroyed all the research and defunded a lot of the programs before this actually happened. So this takes it to another level as well. And you're right. Most of the stuff that happens in medical schools are done from the perspective that we're treating white people and not people of color. And Dr. Jones's comments also too, if you look in the refrigerator, you got something that's been sitting in there too long, when in doubt, throw it out. So if you got symptoms, when in doubt, go check it out.
I just wanted to add too, because we are amidst the legislative session and it consumes my life. And I heard Ms. Jones mention medical debt. And I just want to name the fact that in the legislative session this year, there is a bill being presented by Strong Families New Mexico to make sure that we eliminate bill debt and its predatory ways for New Mexican families. So I'm on that part. Y'all keep helping us with this part.
No, that's part of our work also. Outstanding. Thank you for your contribution.
Wonderful. Well, really quickly, I just want to thank Dr. Tracy Collins for joining us. I know you have to go, but I just wanted to say thank you so much. I am honored to have you with us. And if you want to leave any closing remarks before we get to some of our audience questions, we'd love to have it.
This has been wonderful. It is so great to speak to the community, to hear the perspectives of experts. And I so appreciate being a part of this. So thank you so much. And get your vaccines.
Thank you so much for all the work that you do for our community. And we're just so excited to work with you to make sure that African Americans can not just survive here, but we could thrive here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Martin, the next question is from one of our audience members, and we are going to have you answer that one for us. It comes from Alfred Matheson, and it said the slide we showed earlier that showed that the vaccine is 95% effective. Is there any data on the breakdown of the 5%? What is the racial composition of the 5% for whom the vaccine was not effective?
Well, you know, this sounds like a lot of the questions that Alfred and I always have discussions about. You know, Alfred is a mathematician by training, so he always likes to look for those little nuances and things. In fact, we used to have these not heated conversations, but wondering conversations and developing hypotheses about the Tuskegee syphilis trials, about the amount of men who were, who actually had syphilis in the different levels and what was the background level of the people, particularly those who had served in World War I and had lived overseas and had come back to rural Alabama and stuff. So we always had these questions about the data and what have you. Alfred, when I looked at this slide, there's something I have to look at more carefully because I wasn't completely happy with some of the things I saw in that slide, and I have to look at it differently in another level, the way that it was color coded. So you also know that the government is still not disaggregating the data to look at those subsets. Right now, they're more concerned with the ideas that they're reaching, if they got 10% in both of the clinical trials for those who already have the EUA, that's close enough for them because it also matches with the population levels in the country. So that's enough for them at this particular point. But I do want to say this about clinical trials, having worked in clinical trials for a number of years. And the gold standard for research in clinical trials is randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials. And we do that because they provide the best type of antiviral safety data because they have power, because they have enough power and resources to include massive amounts of people into those studies. Only the government has enough money to work, even pharmaceutical companies can't enroll all the people that they need to do, but the government can and have enough statistical power to identify. But what it does identify rare and potentially serious adverse events. So Alfred, I'm going to take a look at that question a little bit more carefully because I'd like to parse it out in terms of RE also too for a number of different reasons. But I was saying all this in relation to the issue of vaccine safety and how it was created. And some of this I've already alluded to, but I think there are three questions that individuals, whether you're in science or expert or non-expert or not, ought to ask about vaccine safety in these areas. And this is regardless of RE, race, ethnicity. And the three terms are efficacy, effectiveness, and efficiency. And those questions aren't asked enough. And I asked this question in a seminar before the Pfizer vaccine received its EUA with the Dean of Meharry, who was on the advisory board also too. So efficacy, when you hear the news talk about these clinical trials, they talk about efficacy. And efficacy just describes the technical relationship between the technology and its effects. Basically, does it work? That's all they're interested in when they say efficacy. So these trials that have gotten the EUA, they say, oh, it was 95%, and they shouldn't say effectiveness, but it had 95% efficacy, to a certain statistical precision. But efficacy is not the same as effectiveness. Okay, effectiveness is when you look at the application of a technology that has efficaciousness and how it brings about the desired effects, which means does it change diagnosis? Does it alter management plans? Does it improve health? We don't know that yet by these vaccines. We don't know if they're effective or not just yet. We only know the efficacy. And efficacy can only be determined to which a drug achieves its intended effect in the usual clinical setting. So we're going to need more observational studies of real practice, meaning more people getting vaccines and things of that nature, or the two. And that can be done in terms of qualitative terms. So treatment is only effective if it works in real life, not in non-ideal circumstances. In real life, medications are used in doses and frequencies never studied. And we're starting to see that now as people start thinking about variants and other types of things. with other medications that have been tested for interactions. If you ever looked at a PDR, which is a huge, almost 12 inches thick book that talks about all the problems with a medication or a vaccine or a drug, and 2 or 3 paragraphs talks about how it's used, then the other 6 or 12 pages talks about its contraindications, its side effects, its adverse effects, and everything else. And we don't know that until we've seen how it works in real clinical circumstances and situations with people. So effectiveness can't be measured in controlled trials, because if you include that into a study, it distorts the usual practice. All right. Now, efficiency.
Thank you.
Women, I want to get to this last word, efficiency, because these are 3 terms that people should understand when they hear the stuff about drugs and medicine. Efficiency is an economic concept, which relates efficacy and effectiveness to resource use. Right now, we can say that the distribution of vaccines is not very efficient. It's a very acceptable efficacy and effectiveness. We're not using the most prudent, optimal mix of resources. So that gets into the diagnosis and clinical settings also too, whether it's analytical or clinical validity, which says if the text works, does it actually predict the presence or absence of a biomarker of interest? And clinical validity just says the test matters in clinical practice. So there's a whole lot of other stuff here. And this is what I meant about health literacy and understanding research and science and medicine, so that you can ask proper questions of your provider, put them to the task in that sense.
So like one of the questions when you were talking is, what is a PDR?
Oh, physician's desk reference. Because physicians
it's the printed version of the fast commercial. Like, in the commercial when they're talking about the drug, and it's 30 seconds of somebody dancing and then 90 seconds of someone speaking in high tempo about how it's like can include liver dysfunction up to death.
Yes.
Oh, right. I saw one the other day. It was horrible.
That's a part of it in many ways. So as you think about that, you have to realize that physicians only go through a brief period of training in pharmacy, and they rely on the pharmaceutical salesman, the pitchman, to give them that stuff. So there are lots of other considerations here.
Got it.
Well, does it work in real life? So those are deep concerns for deeper learning. And Alfred, call me. We will talk some more about parsing that out, because that's an integral part. But right now, the data that's being collected is really sort of taking us to this point. Is it effective or not?
Got it.
In real time. And, the 2 vaccines that are out there right now only deal with your personal protection. It does not prevent you from passing the disease on to someone else.
Right. So in the interest of time, we want to get to a couple more questions from our audience watching, and then we have a couple more community members here on the panel that we want to go to. So that way we can get on to the demonstration about how, if you do want to get the vaccine, how we can register for them. Question is, what advice do you have women sure about if who would like to take a step?
So I'm not sure if you all couldn't hear her. If you want to check the group chat, the question will be in the group chat. So if any of our experts want to answer that, please feel free.
Can you repeat the question? Because the audience probably didn't hear it either.
Did we lose Nicole? Did we get to Jay Blackwell's question? Is that the one we're doing?
That is the one. So Jay Blackwell asked, she has a sister that is 72 years old, and she suffers from underlying health issues. And she wanted to know what would be a good way to kind of persuade her into getting the vaccine.
I would just begin by saying, I don't know if we would want to take an approach to persuade her, but, to first address what are her concerns and then seeking answers to them. There are answers to how both of those vaccines have worked thus far on individuals in her age group. There are also some answers in the current research about how those vaccines have worked on people, or if they're even recommended for people with weakened immune systems, and what reactions, if any, there may have been. And so I would seek that information specifically to answer those concerns and any others that they may have. So I would begin from a place of acknowledging what the questions are, making sure that those questions are clear, and then going to the data that's already out there. There is data about the age group, about weakened immune systems, other chronic illnesses, and how those vaccines have affected them, and then any other concerns, and then finding some, again, trusted messengers to answer those questions. And then she's likely to make up her own mind, one that is in her best interest and in the best interest of her health.
Well said, Stephanie. I think that's a great way to direct that questioner to following up on things, because in lieu of HIPAA issues and all kinds of other things, we're not qualified to make a diagnosis or prognosis on a situation like that, because we don't know her personal history and all the other things. So you guided her in a way so that she could help her relative's primary care practitioner answer those questions and provide all the answers to those things, even if it takes additional tests and what have you.
Dr. Ben, did you have a follow-up?
Sorry. Hi, this is Hussein speaking. I'd also put out there, I'd underline the trusted messenger. I know a lot of people that get on blog sites, or the rough thing about the internet is you can find any information on there, whether it's true or not. So I would definitely try to look for a reputable site, MayoClinic.com, Cleveland Clinic, the American Association of Family Physicians. I would look for some body, as opposed to a single blogger or a single site, would be my recommendation as well.
Got you. Thank you. Anybody else care to chime in?
I wanted to follow up a little bit, because even before we took that break for the polls, there was a question about mistrust in accessing health systems. And one other thing, to follow up on what Hussein said, is there are a lot of us in the health care system now. Representation matters. And so we have come from a history where we were not adequately represented, if at all. We're still not sufficiently represented in healthcare systems, but we are there in significant enough numbers, I think, to help people in our community feel comfortable about accessing those systems and accessing care. And most of us have made ourselves available to community members to answer questions, or to say, yes, I know a physician in that field, right, who's available to answer that question, who gives us a sense of access into those systems. We need to feel like we belong there. We need to know that we are represented there. Those, I think, are also our trusted messengers. And so please look to us. We actually do exist in those systems at much higher numbers, I think, than many people realize. And ask for us. We need to be accountable and represent to our community, and we're responsible to our community. And so I think
she froze up on us. We're gonna go ahead and move to the next panel member, Aaron Rodgers. You want to introduce yourself and come with your question?
Hello, my name is Aaron Rodgers. I'm a board member with the WellStan Foundation, and I'm also in the film industry out here with New Mexico local films and abroad. My question is more geared towards the flu similarities. Okay, so with the flu similarities and them being so similar, one of the issues that we ran into in one of the productions I was on during the pandemic between September and December was false positives. So we found that people were popping for COVID, and it was a false the reason we determined it was a false positive was because immediately after they popped for COVID, they were immediately removed from set or wherever they were, whether it was a off-campus facility where we were testing or on set prior to starting the day. Then they would be given 3 tests after that, and then another 2 that they would send off to the labs. And we found that at times all those tests after would all come back negative. So with that being said, it's a 2-part question. So can someone maybe field that one?
Anybody want to jump in on that?
I would say, Aaron, some of those tests, with the virus, it's dependent on when you are shedding off the viral load to have those symptoms. There was a lot of variety in tests. And then it's also by who was initiating the test and the techniques. So there's a lot of components in that delivery. And it's hard to really talk to it specifically because, we don't know all the details of the test. And then you were sending some off to a lab, some were collected right then. Different organizations are doing like a dual test where if they test for an antigen and you have it positive, then we, suspect that you have the COVID and you don't run the second test. But if the test antigen comes back negative, then we run another test. So it's kind of hard. I guess I can't really answer the question, but I kind of wanted to put that kind of information out there for you.
Right, definitely. And then the second part of that question, because I was reading on a site today where they were saying people who do receive so people who do receive the vaccine, the 2 parts and are fine, will no longer have to take the safety precautions. That's just in lieu of article. I know precaution and like common sense would say, keep wearing your stuff until, further notice. But also, I guess really the second part of my question is the people who continue to test negative and haven't had any positive tests or anything like that and continue to show negative. What would be the reason for them to get the vaccine if they're showing negative, they're taking care of themselves, they're doing all the mama's remedies and everything like that, and they continue to, test negative, they're at that point in time, some people may feel, hey, then it would be unnecessary at this point in time to take the vaccine.
Is it okay if I talk about both of those? Both
Yeah,
of your questions?
Go ahead, because I was going to jump in too. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll start with the first one about the testing positive and then testing negative. So it really depends on what test that they're using, and then also the location of the test. So there's the anterior nares one that swabs the front of your nose. There's the one that they go to the back of your throat. There's the one they go through nasal pharyngeal, and the one that goes all the way back into the back of your nose. From the last time I read, the nasal pharyngeal had the best sort of metrics associated with it as far as false positives, false negatives, that it was very unlikely to be a false, a false negative. So the test is called the nucleic acid amplification test. And if I'm wrong on this, please you guys let me know. But so what it does is it takes a chunk of the DNA from the virus and it replicates it a certain amount of time, and then it sees if it's able to detect it. Okay.
Yeah.
And so whether that's a dead chunk of virus or whether it's a live chunk, it still tests positive. Okay.
Right.
So you're much more likely to get a false positive. And in other words, you had the disease, now it's gone and you're shedding, but you don't have the clinical syndrome. You just have dead virus that's still in your nose, as opposed to not having the virus at all and testing positive for it. So when I've seen people test negative after testing positive, my question always is how they got the test, because it really is an uncomfortable test. And when I talk to people, they're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. And I was like, oh, they probably weren't getting back to where they were supposed to be getting. So,
right, because the process was, because generally the ones that we'd get were I know the ones that where they're trying to get mucous membranes, that would be the initial ones we'd get, because we do a set of 3 a day. So we get that one, the one that was midway, and then the invasive one was the one they would send off to the lab. So it was a clean slate of all 3 that they would administer after that was showing negatives after that.
Oh gosh, yeah, you would have to talk to someone who's much more savvy with the sort of lab technician than
Right.
me, for sure. But I would say that chances are, if they had syndromes, if they had symptoms, they got tested and it was positive, chances are that they had disease.
Yeah.
Or something, or a disease at the same time, flu-like symptoms at the same time that they recovered from COVID, but there was probably COVID there.
Bet.
Um,
And then,
and
go ahead.
The person should get antibody testing.
Sorry, say that one more time.
You're absolutely right. And as Dr. Jones mentioned also too, there's tremendous variation in terms of, the actual testing procedure itself, as well as the reagents in the labs and all kinds of things. There's tremendous variation. So you're going to wind up with false positives and false negatives and true positives and true negatives and all kinds of other things. But if a person, if they've been exposed and they should get antibody testing to see if they really have some protections, without the vaccine and what have you, and go along there. But quite honestly, even if you've been vaccinated, I would still tell people to practice safe distancing and wear your mask and wash your hands, because this is going to be around with us for at least through 2024.
What's cleanliness is next to godliness, they say. And then also on that last part, the part, if you're testing negative, as far as people who may have apprehension, be like, hey, if I'm testing negative, then I'll just pass on the vaccine until further notice.
That's their choice.
What's the best test to get? Because there's the different variations that you guys have listed, and from the rapid test, the regular nasal test, and then I just heard there's a test that they can take with your throat. What's the best test to get the best result? Which one has the best efficiency to know that, hey, this is the right way to go? Because you hear that you get COVID or exposed to COVID, you want to run out and just get a COVID test, and you want to figure out the answer right away. Which one is suggested among, I guess, all the doctors and professionals and experts that we have here? Which one would be the one to rely on the best?
I had an answer.
In respects to everyone's time, we'll have Dr. Martin answer that, and then we'll have one more person chime in, and then we'll go to the next person.
If I had a quick answer to that question right now, I'd have $1 billion in my pocket. Clear and simple, because there isn't enough testing. We don't know enough yet about the test itself and the different issues, quite frankly. And that causes more anxiety and more uncertainty also too. But if I knew that there was such a gold standard, then I would say, we'd have to go with the gold standard. Like, for example, with HIV, for the longest time, people using ink blot tests and other types of things. Then they decided to use PCR. And I'll explain PCR later, but the PCR test is like, the best example I can give is that you're out on a trawler fishing and you have a huge net and you capture everything in the ocean and say, I got X, Y, and Z, but you caught everything that's in the ocean. Okay, I'm rambling. Let me put it this way. You want to ask questions about sensitivity and specificity. That's what you want to ask your practitioner about. Say, how specific is this test and how sensitive is this test? And if they can give you concrete answers to those questions, then you're in good standing.
And I think the point is here,
in high specificity.
Yes, I think the idea is that you just need to get tested. If you have symptoms and you're worried about that, I trust, and I do have trust in our Department of Health and the testing that's done through the Department of Health. So if you're in doubt, any of the locations there can absolutely, I feel confident telling my community that they can go to the Department of Health to get tested. And I think some of the false, at least in what I've been looking at the data, a lot of the false positives are around rapid tests, right? And so I trust that you could go to any Department of Health location and get tested there.
And
All right.
I'll throw one more thing in there, just about what we call pre-test probability, and I'll explain what that is very briefly. Just if it is the probability that the test is going to be a sort of a true positive, meaning, so if my wife has COVID and I have symptoms and I go in and get tested and that test is positive, I'm more likely to trust that test is positive, right? Because I've had this exposure.
Right.
If I had all of those exposures and I felt like I had COVID, I lost taste, I lost smell, I'm coughing and all this, and I go in and my test is negative, then I might still have COVID. I guess the big fact being is, tests by themselves aren't sufficient. You need history to go along with it. And that's where practitioners step in. Otherwise, we would just have kiosks on the side of the road testing people for everything from cancer to everything else, right? So it's very important that you talk to your doctor about this, because there's ways that they can determine whether whether we should say, hey, let's retest this, or I know it's negative, but you should still quarantine, or you should still take the precautions everyone else is taking, so on and so forth. And what you said about the vaccine, as far as not people deciding not to get it because they've been safe and are doing well so far, getting the vaccine isn't so much about what your risk that you've had in the past, but your risk going forward. So I mean, we call them accidents because no one anticipates them happening. I unknowingly hung out with my sister-in-law without a mask and found out she had COVID. Never anticipated that to be a thing, especially so early in the pandemic. So you never know what you're encountering. So getting the vaccine is not only about protecting you, but protecting your community, like we were saying. So I mean, that's what I would say to them. And I would just say, however, ask yourself how you make decisions, and use that same decision-making process on this, because I assume that people make it this far in their life with some degree of rationality.
And that's the
Thank
hardest
you
thing
for
to
saying that.
talk about risk, because we're talking probabilities.
Yes.
That is
Well,
so-
we have one community member that has been holding on, and I'm so sorry that Mr. Freddie Branch, that we've left you to the end, but I want to go to Frederick Branch and have you introduce yourself and ask the experts your question. And thank you for holding on with us this whole time.
Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this community discussion. Thank you first and foremost to all of the healthcare professionals. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Please continue to do what you do. There are people out here who really appreciate what you do. With that said, Epicurus said, let thy food be thy medicine be thy food. So if that's the approach, why are we synthesizing medicines as opposed to moving forward with food combinations that will allow the body to boost its natural immune system?
This is perfect for Miss Vajra Dorn.
It is. Well, again, as we said, we want to boost our own immune systems, but we know that we cannot totally fight these viruses by themselves. There's nothing to cure it. There's nothing to prevent it. So these are ways that we boost our immune systems to fight the infections and the diseases and the issues that they present to us. But if you can look up all the home remedies, and they will all tell you there is no cure. There is no cure for these viruses. There's just ways to help boost our immune systems and help us get through the disease process that is presented by this virus. Question?
Well, to piggyback off of what Frederick said, though, a little bit, but the vaccination is also not a cure either, as well. It's still just a remedy that's not 100% effective. Correct? Like in the sense.
Right. We're still learning a lot about the vaccine. We know that if you get the vaccine and the virus is introduced into your body, it will keep you from getting as sick. That's the idea behind the virus, the vaccine. And we feel that it keeps the spread. It will keep the spread from happening throughout our communities, because we have the RNA in our system that will prevent us from spreading it. And people can we can expose people to it, but it'll keep us from getting as sick as we would without it. The way I look at it is if you look at all the people that's been vaccinated and you look at all the anaphylaxis and the things that have happened, I have not been able to find but one or I really so far in what I found, I have not found anyone who has died from the vaccination, but we know that hundreds of thousands of people have died from this disease because it attacks our bodies in such a way that many people can't fight it. So it's a gamble. Dr. Martin says we don't yet know all the effects of this vaccine, but we do know the effects of COVID. And we see our community being impacted 3 times greater than any other community. So we just have to decide if it's worth the risk. And in the process, if you're not interested, I do think you can do a lot of holistic things to keep your body as strong as possible. So if you happen to be infected by it, hopefully you would be one of the lucky ones that were able to fight the disease and not succumb to it.
Do you think that our community is getting hit that way because of the lack of wellness in the Black community and the lack of resources for and not necessarily that it's necessarily the virus that's causing it, but more so just the lack of wellness in our communities that has been going on for such a long time? Absolutely.
I think that contributes to it in the same way with the older community. Our older people aren't healthy. They're not active. They succumb to it more. So it's a big community issue, and there's a lot of things that we need to deal with. It's great to see how the churches are able to give foods and stuff in our community at this time during COVID. But you're right. It's not simply. It has a lot to do with our ability to make money in our communities, and ability to feed our families, and ability to treat our illnesses. So yes, no, absolutely, those things affect how we do it, how COVID has affected us. But we have to find ways, even in our communities, we can be healthier. We can try to be as healthy as possible, and get as much health into our bodies as we can, so that when we are attacked by this disease, we have something that can fight it.
I have a quick question too. So in the same way that we know no one has died from the vaccine, isn't that the same way that we know that everybody or the majority of people that have died from COVID-19 all have underlying health issues? So in that same way, wouldn't we be kind of hypocrites in a certain way to say that maybe, I'm gonna use Hank Aaron as an example because he was the last person that people said may have died after he got the vaccination. Wouldn't we be kind of hypocrites to say that he may not have died because of that? Because we really don't know.
I'm glad you asked that, because that's coming up a lot. We did get a lot of community members that said that, or were worried about, is that Hank Aaron's death tied to, he's a staple in our Black community around the COVID vaccine. So Arthur's bringing out the big, tough questions tonight.
Is reach that far?
Say that again.
Is it fair to reach that far? I know this is where it gets sticky, right? That's a big reach, as he was an elder, and we haven't heard from him until his passing, right? Just unfortunately, a lot of the icons we've lost this past year, it's just been a lot of grief. But isn't that also considered one of those, I just get concerned with that type of reach in this space, because he was an elder. Lord knows what was happening prior to. I have elders in my life that while I'm concerned, I'm very aware my grandfather has a pacemaker. I'm very aware he lives in assisted living. There are so many other things. To put that reach in that way, in such a general way, to me feels a little bit much and heavy and too broad for this space.
So as a Black man, I just looked at social media and seen that they were using Hank Aaron as one of the tokenized Black people to come out and say, hey, I got my shot. So in that same token, if we're going to say, oh, well, we don't know if he died from this, we also don't know if he didn't die from that, you know? So I'm not saying that's what it's from. It's just something else that we need
I
to
think it's
address.
part of
Has anyone
This
seen the
is part
pathology
of
report?
the,
Let's go to Hussein first, and then we'll go to Dr. Martin, and then
No,
I think,
I just wonder, has anyone actually seen the pathology report?
Right.
Then you don't know what he died of if you haven't seen the pathology report.
And they've not reported that.
Exactly.
That's not been publicized.
Exactly.
And I would say even if they didn't, right? So we're talking about this from the standpoint of millions of vaccines given. And, you know, even though it's a small percentage of African Americans who've received them in the US, I think it's somewhere around 5% of the people who've been vaccinated have been Black. There haven't been deaths reported. So let's say that Hank Aaron, I mean, it is a reach, but I'll say, let's say if he did die, and that would be one death from the vaccine out of millions given. And last I checked, there were, if you were Black, you were, I want to say 2.8 times as likely to die compared to other races. So somewhere in that ballpark. So, I mean, just let's say that was the case, that Hank Aaron did die from that. Comparatively, your risks of dying from getting the virus are still markedly way, way higher. Not to dismiss that. I mean, that's something that you should think about. I mean, still, but it's just, you know, if those rates were the same as flying an airplane, everyone would be walking and driving. I guarantee you that.
yeah.
It's good that you mentioned flying an airplane, because we do know that in terms of pre-existing conditions, and Hussein, you had this class with me a long time ago. We know that pre-existing conditions, that's like an airline or jumbo jet airliner filled with African-American passengers falling out of the sky and crashing every day because of pre-existing conditions. And so you can't negate what that impact is. When you look at someone like Jackie Robinson, for example, all his life was very active, very healthy, you know, and then developed diabetes and complications of diabetes and died. But we failed to remember the stresses that he went through, you know, that created those illnesses and created those conditions. Not that his biology was defective, you know, the intense stresses of those pressures. And Aaron went through the same thing for a much longer period also too, but he obviously good genes, maybe good diets, health, other types of things. I mean, only God knows when an angel of death is going to come for somebody, you know, when it comes down to that.
Yeah.
But we can do the best things we can in order to preserve our existence and our survivability amidst all the things I mentioned before in terms about how, you know, community immunity becomes the norm when we have higher rates of African-American populations who do receive the vaccine, you know, and depending on the vaccine in terms of protecting themselves or and how it stops transmitting the virus. And then how we have to work in preventing increases in chronic diseases, which was alluded to before. You know, this issue of nutrition and food diets and other types of things. I mean, we've always eaten healthily for the most part, you know, and we're still here, but we're still suffering from the conditions.
Yeah.
So, how do we undo slave health deficits, anti-Blackness, de facto segregation, structural violence, menticide, post-traumatic slave dysfunction? Those are all things we have to look at.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for hanging in with us. We are way over time. I want to thank the people who are here, who are watching. We have one more question, and we're going to go to the Department of Health website because this is an important, very, very, very important conversation or question to have. And so the question is from an audience member: what advice do you have for pregnant women who are unsure about if they should get the vaccine or if they should wait for the vaccine?
I know that my last practice was OBGYN, and what the physicians were doing was leaving it pretty much up to the mothers at the practice that I worked in. There's not enough data at this time to show the effectiveness of the effects of the vaccine on an unborn child. So the physicians were at this point leaving it up to each mother to decide. And I don't know what other practices are doing.
I can tell you that ACOG the American College of Gynecology and Obstetrics, they are recommending that pregnant women get the COVID vaccine. I know the World Health Organization doesn't. So once again, like Mrs. Dorn said, it is something that you should talk with your provider about because it is an individual decision. But once again, the same rationale applies to this as it applies to most other things with getting the COVID vaccine. Is we know that pregnant women with COVID have worse outcomes. We know if you're Black and you're pregnant and you get COVID, your outcomes are even worse. So we have this known threat versus this sort of question of something, and it would be a tough one for me to say no on, but I do believe it's a personal decision.
It is a personal decision, and more data is being released now and coming through, and some of those studies are being replicated in terms of understanding whether or not pregnant women should be vaccinated or not. So it does come down to a personal decision also too. But it also raises the question in some ways as to how we look at this. Is Blackness a pre-existing condition?
Ooh, that's deep.
Blackness in this country might be, just because what you were saying, sort of just the stress of being Black.
Also too,
that's a whole nother event.
That's gonna be part 2 to this. We're gonna have to have a part 2 because we are 5 minutes to 9 o'clock. And I don't want to end this conversation because this is deep, this is rich, and I am just so grateful. And I can't thank you all enough for showing up for us and sharing your hearts and your experiences with our community. I want to thank Amy Suman from the Department of Health Equity Office, who we met with Dr. Zarai and Dr. MacGyver and Dr. Nancy Lopez met with, and we thought, we need to do something, and she backed it. So thank you so much for believing in our vision, and we will have a part 2 because there's still so much more. I know Torrance had something, and then we're gonna go to the demonstration on how to sign up. If you do want to register for the vaccine, we're gonna do a quick demonstration so that you can get the information you need. Plus, Department of Health is looking for trusted messengers. So all of us on this call are trusted messengers for our community, and you can actually sign up. So we're going to talk about that. First, we're going to go to Torrance, and then we're going to talk about how to actually sign up as a trusted messenger or register for your vaccine. Torrance?
First, I wanted to thank you, Nicole. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for all the experts, that everybody that got on and gave their 2 hours of time to educate the people. One thing that I've been huge on with the push with Black Mexico Movement is getting information out and just at least getting you that much and getting you facts, not opinion. And hey, this is what it is. I wanted to emphasize and say, hey, the biggest thing out of all this, no matter what you believe or don't believe one way or another, is do your own research your facts, and dig a little bit deeper than just the surface of a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram post. Is let's all just find the information and make the best decision for us. That's the only way we can do better. And forums like this that we are providing, Nicole is providing, this is how we're getting the information out there. And thank you again, Nicole. I appreciate you.
Thank you for partnering with us. And I thank you to Arthur too, and Duke City Talk, Jasper. Give Jasper a big hand for running the tech, and Austin on the back end so that we can all focus and be
Hi, Austin.
Yeah, we thank you all. So real quick, I'm gonna just do a quick demonstration on the Department of Health's website on where you can find how to get registered. So I'm gonna go back to Google because I wanna show you from the beginning exactly where to go. So just go to Google. I just typed in NMH-DOH. You see it comes up on mine because I'm always on that site looking at things. But you could go right here at the menu here, right to New Mexico vaccine registration. Just go straight there. It will take you right into where you can actually register. So if you go, I like to go to the Learn More button, and it takes me right to questions and then how do I register to do it. It also gives you the information of the phases that we're in, right? So like there's been a lot of confusion about what phase am I in? You can find that information here, as well as a little timeline on when we think your phase will be able to actually get vaccinated. So right now we're registering folks to do that. What I love about this site is it also, we talked about transparency, right? Transparency being a big indicator for our trust. So one of the things I'm always looking at is the COVID vaccine dashboard. You can actually click on the dashboard and it'll show you how many New Mexicans have registered, how many have actually gotten the vaccine. And so there's some really great information that you can find there as well. So what we're going to do is you're going to click here, right here to register. Now, equity is important to us. That's why we're here, right? So if you don't have access to internet, well, you're probably watching us on the internet or on your phone right now. It doesn't have to be a desktop computer. You can do this from your phone. If you have, you can even call in if you aren't comfortable with the computer, like our elderly population, our English as a second language folks, you can absolutely call the 1-800 number here and get help registering over the phone as well. So for tonight though, we're gonna do it online. So we're gonna click right here and I wanna create a new profile. So this is for me, like I've never created a profile. I'm outing myself. I have not even registered yet. Oh, what? Yeah, it's okay. That's why it's a safe space for us to share that. So I want to create a profile. Now I'm not going to do this because you're going to have all my personal information, right? Like I'm not going to actually go through this right now for you, but just to give you an idea of the information that we're asking, of course, your personal information, zip code. If you're helping someone else sign up other than yourself, you can do that. If you're a caregiver or someone in your community asks for help, you can absolutely be active and help somebody else register if you've already registered yourself. So I really believe in the each one teach one method. So teach somebody else how to do this too, and you can actually do this for them. Keep me up with some contact information. Now, one of the things I like is that you can actually choose how you want to engage with the Department of Health. Do you want to get all your updates on email, text? Do you want a phone call saying, hey, this is what's going on? Because you will get updates periodically on what's going on, where you are in line. They're really trying to be communicative, right, about what's going on. Employment information. Now, why do we ask about that? Well, that's because if you're getting the vaccine that's tied to an employer because you're an essential worker, something like that, we want to know that because we want our most vulnerable essential workers, like our healthcare workers, grocery workers, all those folks to make sure that they're getting the vaccination. Chronic conditions, so we want to know that up front so that we can better protect you. One big thing people don't realize is after you get the vaccination, you do have to be observed for a certain amount of time. So we're protecting you by making sure for 15 to 20 minutes after you receive that injection, medical professionals are going to be watching you to make sure that you don't have any adverse effects that need medical attention immediately. So I want to share that with our community because that's a part of the process of this vaccine so that we know that you're safe, which is really important. Then they're asking about homebound folks. So I have a family member who is homebound. He had an accident and can't just drive himself over. So when he registered, that was something that we checked for him so that Department of Health will absolutely help you figure out how to get your shot as well, which is amazing, right? And then any other disabilities that you need some accommodations for, so we can make sure that you have what you need when you come to get your vaccine. And then you just make sure you're not a robot with your CAPTCHA and submit your registration. It's really that easy, right? And it doesn't take long. There's not a whole bunch of crazy stuff in here that we're asking for. I know we are going to be asking for race and ethnicity to be added to this as well, because I'm really personally interested in, hey, how many African Americans in New Mexico have signed up for the vaccination? So that's important to us as well. So register New Mexico Health's website. The last one that I want to share with you is the Trusted Messenger nominations. This website is togethernewmexico.org, and we'll put these in the chat as well. And this is really about searching for motivating voices like ours. So everybody on this panel should sign up to be a trusted messenger with the Department of Health. You're doing it already tonight, right? So might as well make it official and become a partner with the Department of Health. There's not a lot of information And you can actually nominate people. What? I'm going to nominate Torrance to be a trusted messenger. And this is something that really worked. We did a lot of outreach in the African American community around the census, and trusted messengers was the way that I think we're going to see some success when it comes to the census. And we want to do the same for our African American community. So we need African American community to get up today, sign up, not only to get your vaccine if you so choose, but also to sign up as a trusted messenger so we can help educate others about doing it too. So with that, I want to thank you all so much for being with us tonight and sticking through, even though we went like a half an hour over our time. But thank you for sticking with us. I am so grateful for you all. New Mexico, stay healthy, wash your hands, wear a mask, register for the vaccine, get you some healthy food like Frederick and Vajra were talking about, so that you can stay healthy as well and fight it off if you need to. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.
If you see something, say something, do something, people.
Yes, thank you, Arthur. Thank you so much, Arthur, my amazing moderator and person I always go to run through these ideas. Thank you so much.